Welcome to the Veganuary podcast, the podcast that helps you to try a vegan diet. It's stuffed full of hints and tips for anyone who wants to eat more plants.
Veganuary 2025 is proudly sponsored by our international sponsor, the Vegetarian Butcher. Check them out and see details of all of our other sponsors in the episode description.
Good. Wendy, how's your week been? Have you done anything that was very, very cliche vegan this week, or in fact the opposite, anything that was very un-vegan?
Yeah, it was a good week. I would say the most vegan thing I did this week is I bought a pair of broccoli earrings. I'm wearing them right now. I'll try to show them off. I don't know if I can get them close enough to the camera.
For a second, I was expecting it to be like real broccoli.
That would be a very stinky earring. Yeah. No. But yeah, I just popped into a little jewelry shop in my hometown. And yeah, I mean, if there was a vegetable earring, I was going to buy it. So that's my vegan story of the week. What about you?
Very cool. Have you had any compliments on them yet?
This is the first time I've worn them. I busted them out for the podcast.
Nice. Well, I got to visit an animal sanctuary with Veganuary and go and do some filming there and some photos, which was really nice. I get to do that every, now and again for Veganuary, and yeah, it's always really good. It reminds you kind of why we're doing this, and hung out with some really nice sheep, some really like chilled out cows, some like quite grumpy pigs. Yeah, it was really good, and some llamas, but we were advised to stay away from the llamas.
Because they're spitters?
I think so. They seemed quite cheeky llamas.
Yeah, so you know that my background is in the sanctuary world. I used to work for Farm Sanctuary in upstate New York, and I really miss getting to spend all that time with the rescued animals. It's such a cool experience. And like you said, I think the cows and the sheep are just so relaxed, and it's so peaceful to be around them. I like a bit of chaos, so I always like to hang out with the goats, who are just absolutely wild. But it's so much fun to spend time with animals.
Well, on a previous visit to a sanctuary this year, I hung out with some chickens, and I am a little bit. Chickens make me a bit on edge, actually, because
really?
I think it's like sudden movements, like flapping, but actually this was really nice. I was encouraged to sit on the floor, and the chickens just sort of came to me, and it was very nice. I felt very at peace holding a chicken, and
Sounds lovely.
I sang to a chicken.
I'm glad you got over your fear of chickens too.
Yeah, it was lovely. We're going to be speaking to Kuntal, who's one of our ambassadors for Veganuary in India. So people might not know, obviously, you're in the US, I'm in the UK, so people can probably gather that Veganuary is in the US and the UK, but people might not know that Veganuary is in India as well as a bunch of other places. We also have teams that work for Veganuary in Latin America and in Germany and in Spain. And we work with quite a lot of partners around the world as well, don't we, Wendy?
We do. So as of the 2025 campaign, we will be present in 20 countries around the world, either with our official chapters or with our partner organizations who run the campaign in their countries, and kind of help adapt it to the local culture. So yeah, since we started in the UK, we've really taken quite a global approach, and still many more places to go.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's a big part of our mission, I suppose, as we see it, is we kind of found a recipe for Veganuary that worked really well and took off in the UK, and has been going for over 10 years in the UK. Officially, it's been going for a slightly less time in the US, although lots of people were doing it in the US before we really established ourselves there properly. And yeah, our approach is to kind of take this formula that we found and see how we can translate it to other countries and apply it to other countries, in the hope that it becomes, well, what it is already, a global phenomenon, but becomes more of a global phenomenon, I suppose. Yeah, so that's a big part of our work, and one of our biggest chapters is in India, where we have lots of participants. So it'll be great to speak to Kuntal and hear that interview in a minute. Yeah, and if you think that's a worthwhile thing to do, then we'd love it if you could support us. Donations really do help us reach out into more countries and establish Veganuary in more countries and help more people eat more plants, which is really the aim. Okay, should we get on to our interview with Kuntal then?
Let's do it.
Okay, we're going to have a listen to Kuntal's interview now. Kuntal Joisher is a mountaineer and a nutrition and fitness coach. He is the first person to have climbed Everest while following a vegan diet. Proving the strength of plant-based people is certainly a motivation for Kuntal. He once said, "It is important for me to send a message across the world that vegans can do it. I want to debunk every single myth around veganism." So let's have a listen to our interview with Kuntal. Kuntal, welcome to the Veganuary podcast. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the invitation and really looking forward to our chat.
Great. We're going to talk about your journey to a plant-based diet and all the things you've achieved while following a plant-based diet. But first of all, I'd love to know your dream vegan meal. If you were on death row, what would be the last thing you ordered?
I would not want to be on a death row, but let's say, I'm on top of Everest and, I'm like lost and about to die. And let's say I have like one wish. I can eat like a great vegan meal. I think like while I love Indian food, what I truly love is some like American junk food. So
Okay.
I would really like to eat like an awesome kick-ass burger with like really good patty, lots of avocados, amazing, melted vegan cheese and some good chipotle or like a Thousand Island mayo dressing and like a side of like amazing like maybe deep fried sweet potato fries, like something like that. Like I can just imagine a burger. Anytime someone says, "Hey, what would be like your favorite meal?" Like there are too many Indian food items, but I would always think of a burger. I'm like, this is it. Like I really need the best burger. Like I remember when I was living back in Los Angeles, there was this place called Real Foods Daily, and they used to make a burger with tempeh bacon. I don't know if it still exists, but their tempeh bacon was the best in the world. Like I had never eaten tempeh in my life, and I ate tempeh bacon. This was like 2003, 2004, and I still can kind of right now like remember that burger, and I'm like, wow, I would like really do anything to get that burger again. It was like such huge burger and such a filling meal. So
I've had that burger, and that is such a good burger. And actually for a little while, there was a Real Food Daily at LAX. So every time I came or went from the city, I would get that burger. Yeah, great choice. So tell us about before you went vegan. What kind of food did you eat when you were growing up?
So growing up, I think one of the things that I distinctly remember is that I actually did not like milk. Like my family would force feed me milk because we would like in India buffalo milk is more common than cow milk. So at the moment it would like touch my like it would come near my nose, I'm like, yuck, this just tastes terrible. And then my mother would make ghee out of the milk at home, and the home would stink badly. Even today, like my mother is a vegetarian, so she still makes ghee out of the milk. And honestly, I'm like, why are you making this stuff? Like it tastes like a dead animal. Like I can't even stand like in here. So milk, ghee, these things I never liked. Paneer is also something I never liked. So if I recollect, honestly, I would say I was a 80%, maybe 70% vegan, because I was mostly eating vegan food because most Indian vegetarian food by like accident or by default is just vegan, unless you are eating milk and milk products mostly through sweets. So definitely sweets was something that was my like my weakness, I would say. So a lot of Indian sweets mostly made from milk and milk products. Now in that way, when they put ghee in the sweets, I was okay. I could eat a lot of them.
Mm.
So from that perspective, it was very different. And then when I came to the US, I came to do my masters at University of Southern California in Los Angeles. So I remember first time drinking the organic Horizon cow milk. And while I am a vegan, I have to say that whatever I remember back then, it just tasted out of the world good. Like I was drinking like by a Tetra Pak. Like I would just bring it and I would drink it all alone. And then for the first time, I tasted cheese in the US. Like I was never a cheese fan in India. In India, the cheese like very people would make it very crispy and non-stretchy. So only been exposed to that cheese. But then I came to the US and then I tasted cheese on nachos at Taco Bell. And then I also tasted cheese at Papa John's Pizza. And I was like, whoa, what the heck is this stuff? Like, this just tastes so good. And so then, like, I started like eating a lot of that. And because I was also kind of like doing a student job, I was also making money on my own, which is like I was independent now. So I could like buy things on my own. So I remember getting pastries and like some really good like desserts and stuff from university canteen, and even stuff like Snickers bars and Toblerone and stuff that I had always wanted to eat but would never get to eat. And all of these things had egg whites or eggs as an ingredient, and of course dairy was always there, but even eggs was as part of the ingredient list. So like I would say mostly lot of plant-based food, lot of vegetables, lot of fruits, lot of lentils, like and rotis and bread. So most lot of whole grains, and of course the usual junk food that would be part of an Indian family. A whole host of street food that we make at home, much hygienic and much healthier. But then some of these items as well. Once I kind of came to Los Angeles, where I did take kind of liking to dairy, especially milk, where I started consuming it a lot in various forms. So yeah, that was what I ate when I was growing up.
So then, were you in the States when you decided to switch to a vegan diet? How did that come about, and what was what was your reason for going vegan?
So what happened is that a couple of my roommates come from the Jain community. Now Jains are ethical vegetarians, or that's how they would like to kind
Yeah.
of think of themselves, whereas I was just an accidental vegetarian because I was just born in a vegetarian family, so I grew up consequently as a vegetarian. uh, so then my two roommates, especially one of them who was very passionate about the philosophy, and the philosophy is based on the concepts of ahimsa, which is non-violence, or karuna, which is compassion, or jivdaya, which is basically taking care of animals. So some of these are like literally the fundamental like tenets of the philosophy itself. And he started kind of pointing me to things like, hey, why are you eating eggs? Hey, like, why are you buying this leather belt, or why are you buying this leather wallet, and all those kind of questions. And I would just kind of like, hey, this is my nagging auntie, I just can like just like ignore. And I kind of did that for a bit, but then it got too much because every grocery trip would end up with him asking me a question. And so then I asked him, hey, what's the problem? I can't see the egg. So and it's so such nicely packaged and kept on a grocery shelf. Same with the leather belt. What's the problem? It's just like a product, and I'm wearing it. Like, how is an animal involved here? So he did two things. He provided me two undercover videos from PETA. PETA has been in the game forever.
Mm.
And so this was 2002, late 2002, where he gave me undercover videos of leather industry and undercover videos of egg industry. So I looked at both the egg industry and the leather industry videos, and it was like, what the heck? Like, like I never connected. I mean, sure, I was 22 when I was adult, but I didn't connect the dots that leather is like literally the skin of an animal. Like it's such nicely packaged, and we are so desensitized towards some of these things that I'm like, this is leather. I'm buying it from grocery. How I'm not going to a slaughterhouse and getting a chicken killed and bringing it home for dinner. That's not what I'm doing. I've never do that. right? It's an animal. I know it's being killed. I would never do that. But I didn't connect the dots. That is exactly what is happening for leather to come, on my body. And then I know that back then there was no YouTube. So people were hosting videos on their own, like,
Mhm.
websites. And
Yeah.
so at the end of the leather page, there was like this another link said, do you want to know about dairy? And I'm like, you must be kidding me. Dairy can't be a problem, right? Like, how can, like, it's milk, it's so tasty, it's so yummy, and we take care of the cows. How can this be a problem? So then I click on that link, and then the undercover footage starts, and
Mm.
it describes the whole process. And I'm like, this is insane. This is like, look at the whole life cycle. It is filled with exploitation, abuse, eventually slaughter, and just repeat, repeat, repeat separation. And these are like crazy things. Like, I'm like, I call myself a compassionate person. At least, I think that by not eating meat, I'm doing whatever I can for the animals. I may not be like, the role model or something. I'm doing whatever I can, but it was like, this is crazy. And in 22 years, for the first time in my life, I was at crossroads. Everyone will have their own crossroads in their
Mhm.
lives. And for me, this was my first one, because till then I was known as Kuntal, the happy-go-lucky guy next door. He'll just do whatever his friends say. He's just chill guy. And I'll agree. I had apathy about most issues in life. So I think most probably people growing up till a certain degree are like that, unless they're exposed to some of these issues. So I had two choices. I could say apathy was bliss, ignorance is bliss, life is good, let's move on. This is good, all information, great information to have. Or I could have done something about it. And I really thought I wanted to do something about it, because I felt that there was a strong disconnect between my compassionate thoughts, but it didn't align with my actions. And I really thought that I wanted to reconcile that. And so I then went on Google. Of course, Google was existing back then. So I typed on Google that, hey, I want to not eat animal products, and how can I do that? And so I started running into a lot of vegan links, and that's how I discovered the vegan movement, where I'm like, there are like hundreds of thousands of people across the world who identify as vegans and who are very committed to this movement. And I thought, this is cool. I would really like to do this. And right off the bat, I knew that there are two things that are totally under my control. As someone, of course, who imagine I've come from India to the US. So my parents have paid for a university like USC. Of course, I'm a privileged person. Right? It's not like someone from India can come to USC, like a private college, and study there. It doesn't happen. Just, hey, I'm so I knew that two things were in my control: the food that I eat, and what I put on my body in terms of clothing, and let's say the soap I use or the toothpaste I use, some of those things. So what I did is, I was living with these roommates of mine. So I figured out all the things that were non-vegan that were with me, at least to the best of my judgment, that hey, these are all things non-vegan, and I kind of decided to just give them away. So I tried giving away as much as I could. Then I gave away some of it to the community center and some of it to the homeless people.
Mhm.
Like I literally had a grocery cart that I was like, walking around with,
Wow.
around, and then whole host of things that was I couldn't do, give it away. I just threw it away. Now, if I would have done it, I would not thrown away anything. But anyway, back then I just thought I had to have a fresh start.
Mhm.
I really, just want to go, do this. And from next day I was a vegan. That's pretty much it.
Wow.
There was already stuff in my house that was vegan. I mean, most
Mhm.
of it was vegan. I just had to stop eating dairy. That's pretty
Yeah.
much it. And then I had to figure out in terms of the soaps and everything. But my ethical vegetarian friend, he already had his soap which was vegan. He already had a toothpaste which was vegan. So all of those things I could borrow from him. So anyway, I didn't really care about others. I'm like, I have to take this call. I have to take this stand. And I took the stand for animals that day. And I think the only regret I have, which most vegans have, is that why didn't I take this stand sooner?
Hmm.
Mhm.
And honestly, this crossroads is something where I actually took a rebirth, because the Kuntal that I know from the 22 years before that, I honestly would not be friends with him. I'll be very honest. Right? That Kuntal was not passionate about anything. That Kuntal didn't take a stand for any issues. Yes, make merry, live life, and all of those things are great. But I think all of those things can be done with having passions in life and with standing up for your ethics and your morals and your values. So I think all of those can be done together. And veganism opened the doors because I was able to make a connection about oppression of a certain species that we were doing, and that led me to looking inwards for the first time in life. Like, till then I didn't know that a word called introspection existed, and that you could literally sit down and think about certain issues that you have opinions on, and start working on changing those opinions. Like, for example, very simple thing like homophobia, or even, for example, let's say sexism, or in India a very very common thing is casteism.
Mm.
So while I didn't have any like strong opinions around these, but when I started thinking about some of these things, because when I got involved in the vegan community, this is what most vegans are talking about,
Mm.
right? It's not just about animals. We have to start looking much bigger picture. So I started looking at some of these aspects in myself, and I'm like, I would really not be friends with myself. I am a toxic person, and I really need to fix this shit, and I really need to go on this journey. I will tell you that things didn't change overnight. It took a while. I had to kind of go on this journey, but it all started with me going vegan. It all like, I'm not saying that I ate broccoli and suddenly I got nirvana or something, uh, but it was this symbolic act of taking a stand for something that allowed me to then do this across many other issues in my life, and I continue doing that. And it's only started with veganism, which is why I say, and I don't say this lightly, it was my rebirth. It was a new Kuntal that took birth when veganism started. So, like, I jokingly tell people that I'm 22 years old, even though I am 44, because I mean, truly, I'm 22 years old. So, yeah, that was my vegan journey and how my veganism started.
Yeah, incredible, incredible story, Kuntal. And I love this visual of you walking across the USC campus with a shopping cart, just giving away belongings because your eyes have been opened. That's so powerful. And I just wonder, you said it didn't happen overnight. So, what were some of the things that you found challenging at first about changing your diet?
Um, I think in the initial portions, what I did was I just stuck to what I was eating at home. So basically, what I had at home was lentils, and usually, what my diet would be whole host of lentils, some curry, and basically Indian bread, roti. And this is pretty much what I would keep repeating, either roti or rice, and then just some lentils and some curry on the side. So initially, I said, let's just keep it simple. I don't want to try and go out to restaurants or cafes and start experimenting. I don't want to do any of those things. I don't want to go to a grocery store and figure out what's vegan, what's not. By then, I had also joined a vegan community group online. So I was starting to get some idea about what is vegan, what is not. I did have to replace milk because that is something I really loved. So I had to find out what milk options I would get. And I walked into a Ralph's, and I remember that there was, even back then in 2002, there was a massive aisle of just soy milk. Of course, there were no other milks back then, but there was a massive aisle of soy milk. And I chose a couple of them. I brought home, and there was a company called West Soy. I don't know if it still exists or not, but I really loved the taste. And for all the 6 years that I was in the US, I drank so much West soy. Like, they could literally make me their brand ambassador. Like, that much soy milk I must have like had. But other than that, I really didn't experiment around with any vegan food. I was just sticking to this, which meant that the struggles were mostly around when I was going out and eating with friends, and my options were really limited because I was like, I don't know whether this is vegan. Might as well not order. And then there would be these product launch parties from my work, and They would invite me to the launch, and they would take me to place which is like a steakhouse or something, and I'm like, I'm not going to get anything here. But what I started doing is, this was not the smartest idea, but what I started doing is I would go to these dinners, go so many team dinners or lunches, and I would not order anything, which would mean that I would become the center of attraction, and people would ask me, why are you not ordering anything? And that was my time to do some veganism evangelism, because I really, really, from the bottom of my heart, thought that if everyone went vegan, our world would be such a better place. And I still think that. It's just that now my strategy is very different. But back then, I thought anything that I can do to convince people. And I thought that, just I was very militant vegan. So every conversation would just be centered around veganism, because I thought this is it. This is the solution to every problem on the planet. And so everything would just come down to veganism. Hey, you have to go vegan. And all of those things started happening. But again, like you said, that it wasn't a struggle, because look, every time I thought it was a struggle, I would always think of those animals, right? Like all those animals that are going to get slaughtered and abused and exploited for what? I didn't even need to, consume any of those products. So it's not like I'm missing out on anything, or it's not like it's necessity, which is driving some of those things, and none of that like was there. So I mean, I would say, yeah, sure. It's a bit of an adjustment, but I'm cool. And then luckily, I started discovering some of the vegan cafes around the Los Angeles area. And I also happened to move away from USC for my work, and I started living in Santa Monica, which turned out to be like a vegan heaven. There were like literally 5, 6 vegan cafes, and there was Whole Foods market, there were Traders Joe, and there were co-op markets. And I suddenly started discovering this new world of vegetables, and new world of, again, started, kind of like expanding my horizons around fruits, and just things like tofu, tempeh, seitan. All of these things have existed forever. Fake meat has existed forever. Like 2002, I ate my first burger patty from Native Foods, which had a fake meat patty. The fake meat was so real that I actually threw it away. And I went on Native Foods website and I wrote a bad review saying that they fed me real meat, to the point where Tanya, who was the owner of Native Foods, actually called me because I wrote such a terrible review. And she said that what you ate is just soy patty. And I'm like, that cannot be possible. It felt like meat. It tasted like it like just seemed like meat. And then I got so hooked on to fake meat after, like, Tanya convinced me that, like, hey, this is good stuff. Come try it out again. And then Native Foods literally became my second home, and I started having so many vegan friends. I started finding community support, and I think at that point the life was, I think life became really good. Like, it was really a lot easier, I would say, just from a transition perspective. To be very frank, it was never difficult, but like sometimes we feel, oh, it's such an adjustment, and oh, I'm not able to do this, I'm not able to do that. Those all things are so minor in comparison to the overall cause that that shouldn't really matter. uh, but irrespective, we are all human, so we all have our journeys. Luckily, I found my community, luckily I found support, and a very good environment that I was in, and I was able to easily thrive as a vegan, and it was honestly not a problem.
That's great. I'd like to pivot slightly and ask you about the mountaineering. So, tell us about some of your best achievements, some of the expeditions you've undertaken, and how you see it linking to your vegan activism, I suppose.
At some point in 2010, October of 2010, uh, I kind of discovered my dream of climbing Everest. And I had no background in athletics or sports or climbing mountains. I come from a family where if someone even wants to climb one floor, they would prefer taking elevator rather than going up the stairs.
Yeah.
So that's the kind of family I come from. And So basically, no genetic gift. And I had also moved back to Mumbai to take care of my father, unfortunately, who was diagnosed with Lewy body dementia. So I was his primary caregiver back home, and living in plus 40 degrees Celsius. So it's not like I'm like imagining climbing in minus 40 degrees
Mm.
Celsius. That's not something, I want to do. But I'm going to skip the story. Let's get to the part where I discovered that my dream is to climb Everest. And so I came back and I started conversing with a couple of climbing agencies that, hey, I would like to climb Everest, and can I do it as a vegan? So I think that's when kind of some pushback started happening. That first of all, no vegan has climbed Everest. This
Mhm.
was October of 2010. So no vegan has climbed Everest. And some of the dietitian, like I remember one of the dietitian of one of the agencies said that to you will on when you are on the mountain climbing Everest, you will have to eat beef jerky, you will have to eat cheese cubes, and you will have to eat things like spam. And I'm like, I looked up spam back then. I'm like, "Oh, do people eat spam? Like for real?" Like I'm like, this makes no sense. That how I mean, I'm like, what? Not that I'm discriminating between animals, that people should eat one kind of animals or other. I'm like, people should not eat animals. But I'm like, I looked at spam and I'm like, okay, whatever.
Well, I
So
used to get served it for school dinners when I was a child.
okay.
Spam fritters. Sorry to interrupt.
So anyway, so I'm like, okay. And then she said that even when you are building or doing your training for climbing mountains, you will have to eat some form of animal protein so that you can build your stamina, you can build the strength, you can build the endurance. I'm like, this to me as an engineer makes no sense whatsoever. But okay, sure, there's some pushback. And like in my mind, I'm reverse engineering and thinking, okay, when she says meat, spam, beef jerky, it's protein basically. When she says eggs, like milk or all of these things, it's basically protein, calcium, some essential fats, some micronutrients. So it's not like I have to eat those things. What I really need is protein, calcium, micronutrients.
Mm.
Plants have all the micronutrition and protein and carbs and fiber and essential fats that we really need to not only survive but actually thrive. So I'm like, this makes no sense. But I'm like, okay, they are pushing back for a reason. Perhaps, they have it in their mind. So in my mind, I have to at least test this out. If it works, great. But if it doesn't work, it's okay. I'll try again. If it still doesn't work, it's okay. I don't need to climb Everest. This is not something I'm going to, like start eating meat just so that I can climb
Yeah.
Everest. And people do that, by the way. Coaches in India, like mountaineering coaches in India, actually force their vegetarian clients to eat eggs and meat once
Mm.
they start training under them. This happens, I've heard from so many people. So I'm like, let's just try. So in July of 2012, after 1 year of training, a little less than 1 year of training, I submitted my first 20,000 feet mountain. And if I remember that expedition correctly, if I have to make like a top 50 challenges that I faced on that expedition, veganism was not even 51st challenge on that expedition. So it was that non-issue.
Yeah.
And I quickly realized that mountaineering is primarily a game of eating tons of carbs. And there's only one thing that has carbs in the world, which is plants. The
Mm.
animals don't have carbs. So it's not like, yeah, maybe sure, some carbs maybe here and there, but truly the source of carbs on the planet is all plants. And so I realized that this is actually going to be a lot better. This is actually going to help me. It's not going to hamper me in any way. This is actually going to help me. And one of the right away things that I actually saw, I did have to tweak my diet a bit because I was also eating a lot of junk food.
Mm.
So I did have to kind of, get smarter with what my plate was overall. Just include more whole, minimally processed foods. Yes, with some, room for junk foods and some foods that I liked, so that to keep the diet a little bit more sustainable. But I did like kind of, change my diet. And what I realized after a few months is that my recovery from my workouts, and this is some really high volume work that I was doing every week, like in the gym or in the mountains, is that I started recovering a lot better, a lot faster, and I started rapidly progressing in some of my training. And I feel, from my understanding, I'm also a nutrition coach now. So in last 5 years, I've pivoted and I've become a nutritionist. So I understand the nutrition world a lot more. And I feel back then what was happening was that a whole host of antioxidant content and just my stomach being lighter in general, I feel aided my recovery a lot, because I feel stomach is something really important, at least subjectively. I'm not going to claim this as, like some thorough scientific evidence, because I'm an anecdote at that point. But I realized that subjectively, if I was feeling great in my stomach, like, not bloated and just feeling nice and light, and my bowel movements were very regular, I actually felt great. And I think by just eating a more whole foods diet, I was kind of getting those benefits.
Mm.
So eventually, like I trained for 4 or 5 years. Eventually it was time to go to climb Everest. And I think one of the bigger challenges, especially with climbing Everest, was finding the right gear. So food didn't turn out to be my challenge at all, but climbing gear did turn out to be a challenge.
Right.
In the beginning, there were two or three things that were really a sticking point. The first one was leather shoes.
Mm.
Second one was gloves with leather palms, and gloves with down insulation, or mittens with down insulation. And then there was the biggest of the challenges, which was the one piece suit that I would wear on the top of Everest,
Mhm.
which was completely made from, I mean, at least the inner insulation was made from feathers. So those were the challenges. Now I was able to find suitable shoes, boots. I was able to find proper sleeping bags, which were minus 40 degrees Celsius, minus 20 degrees Celsius. These were much bigger, much heavier than their non-vegan counterparts. But honestly, as I said before, extra 1 or 2 kilos or some extra minor adjustments, they're not a big deal.
Mm.
They're not a game like a showstopper or anything.
Mhm.
So that was totally okay. So I was able to resolve most of those items. Where I ended up, getting an issue was this one piece suit. Unfortunately, I wrote to many companies across the world. Pretty much every big company, gear company that you can think of, I have written to them. Unfortunately, most of the response was, "You are one human demanding this.
Mhm.
Financially, how can we fund this? Who will test this?" Some of them said technology is not available, which was not true, by the way. The technology has all been there for a while now. It's just that there was not enough demand and they didn't want to do it.
Mhm.
That's pretty much it. And so when it came time to climb Everest in 2016, uh, I made one time choice of actually buying a down suit. Uh, I told myself a story that I'm buying a responsible down suit, which is a gear standard called RDS. Um, I can stand here or sit here and tell you right now that that is absolute bullshit. Okay, there is no humane down. It does not exist. There is no humane eggs. There is no humane meat. This whole humane washing is just crazy. You are plucking feathers of a live bird. It's never going to be humane.
Mm.
It's just as simple as that. And they'll say things like, but oh, the feathers fall on their own, and we will just collect those feathers. Please understand the demand for feathers across the world. We are 8 billion population on the planet, more than 8 billion. This level of feather production cannot be done via an RDA standard, where
Mm.
the feathers are just falling and you are going to source the feathers and make jackets. Irrespective of that, you are anyways going to kill the birds once they are not producing the feathers.
Mm.
So you are just growing them for exploitation purposes. There's no bodily autonomy, there's no consent, there's just nothing. It's just you are treating it as a shelf object, as simple as that. So just humane washing it doesn't make anything it right in any way. Anyway, I had to tell myself a story. And this was also a time where I was in just at a place where I thought I need to climb Everest, and I need to show it to people that it can be done, and that it can be done as a vegan. And so I wore this down suit, I summited Everest. And yes, it got a lot of press, and there was a lot of exposure, and people started following me, people started listening to me. The activism that I always wanted to do was now actually starting to kick in, because all these people who were not willing to listen to me, but now that have climbed all these mountains, are now willing to listen to me, or asking me questions. Hey, what do I eat? Hey, how do I climb? Hey, how do I train? And that was my way into their life. and to inspire them to kind of go vegan. So while all of those things were great, and I was able to do the activism that I always wanted to do, rather than being that militant vegan who literally no one was listening to, but instead of that, a person who's actually making tangible impact in the lives of animals. So yes, all of that was happening, but internally there was a turmoil that I climbed Everest as a non-vegan,
Mm.
that I wore that jacket, and that I compromised with my ethics, that I compromised with my values, and that I should have tried harder, right? Like I tried for 4 years to create a jacket. Not the end of the world. Everest is not ending. Everest is still there. I am still there, right? I could just have said, let's try another year. Let's try another year. It's not. And the good thing was in 2016, veganism was also going very
Mm.
exponential at that
Sure.
point. It was the year like a tipping point for the vegan movement in some way. So maybe honestly, if I had waited, I may have been able to just find, some help later on. But anyway, it is what it is. I can't change my past. What I could have done at that point was I could have decided that my actions that I would do then and try to submit as a vegan later on. And so I started writing again to all of these gear companies saying, hey, can you make me a synthetic suit? And a year later, in July of 2017, a company called Save the Duck, which is an Italian based gear manufacturer, they wrote back to me saying that we'll build you a suit. And I was like,
Wow.
wow, like this is like and Save the Duck has been around forever. Like they have been one of the pioneers in the animal free space in terms of creating gear, and not mountaineering gear, but mostly city and like outdoor gear. So I was able to kind of like get a buy-in from them to build my jacket. And a year later, I was climbing a mountain called Lhotse, which is the fourth tallest mountain in the world. And I was at the base camp, and I did have my down suit. So I didn't know. I'm like, I have already purchased the down suit, and I still don't have a synthetic suit in hand. I haven't really heard from Save the Duck. While they
Mm.
have promised they're going to send me a down suit, or like an animal free down suit, I still don't have it. And I am paid the money for climbing this mountain. So let's see what happens. On April 27th, I remember the date. A helicopter lands at the base camp with a parcel for me, and I open it, and I in my hand I have what I believe is the first animal free suit of the world.
Oh.
And I was literally like a kid in a candy store. And this was like the biggest dream of my life come true. Of course, it was only the suit. It had to be tested on the mountain.
Yeah.
And it was ironic that I would make myself the guinea pig and like go on the mountain, but I would have it no other way. I'll be very honest here, right? Like I made the mistake in 2016, and I had to correct it. This as simple as that. My life's single purpose at that point was that I need to undo what I did in 2016, and that can only be undone if I like go and build this suit and go and climb this mountain. So that is it. That was only thing that was going in my mind. I was aware that things could go wrong and that could have a backlash against the vegan community, because if a vegan dies, if, forget if a vegan dies. If we even sneeze,
Yeah.
it's about our
Yeah.
veganism. So it's imagine how much of a microscope kind of we are under
Yeah.
all the time. So I was kind of aware of that, but I'm like, you know what? I'm not going to die. It's not happening. And the suit just looks good. And I trust Save the Duck. And I submitted Lhotse on May 15th, 2018. And honestly, I was just fine. The temperature on the top was minus 30 degrees Celsius, and the
Wow.
winds were okay. They were not so bad. So the suit just functioned perfectly fine. It was slightly heavier, slightly bulkier. That was least of my problems. I would be more than happy to take on that extra weight on my back for the animal. So I tested the suit, and I remember, because I said this story earlier today on the other podcast, is when I was standing on top of Lhotse, I could see Everest right from there, because
Mm.
Everest and Lhotse are sister mountains. And all the very first thought I had in my mind is, now it's no longer a question of how. Now it's only a question of when this is
Yeah.
going to happen. So I am going to be on top of that mountain like very soon. And there was like clarity in my mind about that. Luckily, Save the Duck ended up sponsoring my expedition, and in 2019 I returned to Everest. and it was about a 51-day expedition. On May 23rd at around 5:30 in the morning, I stood on the very top. To like relatively drama less, or I would say event free expedition. There was nothing that really happened, and that's how I like my expeditions. I don't like any drama. And it was totally a secret expedition because I didn't want anyone to know that I'm doing it. Because then otherwise people are just all the time, on your case. They are just asking.
Yeah.
And I also had this mindset that let's just go and do it and then show it to the world. Rather than, just announcing, hey, I'm doing this, I'm going to do a vegan expedition, da do da, and then like kind of struggle on the mountain, or if something goes wrong and you can't climb it. I thought let's just go. Let's stay focused. Let's just get to the top. This is what I had always set out to do when I first decided to climb as a vegan. And I remembered, the promise I had made myself in 2010. I had promised myself that I will do this as vegan or I will not do it at all. And I broke that promise in 2016. And I reminded myself, you broke that promise and you have to fix this. And so, like, it was a quiet expedition. May 23rd, I reached the top, 5:30 in the morning. I didn't like I didn't even allow myself to cry on the top. Like the previous 2016, like I was there for 20 minutes and half the time I was just crying. But here I'm like, I'm not going to cry, I'm not going to do anything. I'm on the top, I'm going to take a picture, I'm going to take a video, and I'm going to get the heck out of here. I am not going to announce until I get to the base camp. I get to the base camp and then I properly write a post and talk about why I did this, and then share it with the world. And that's pretty much what I ended up doing a couple of days later when I was finally down at the base camp. So that was the journey that I took to get to the top of Everest, and some of the behind the things that happened around the suit and around mainly the challenge around the gear.
Brilliant.
Wow.
That's amazing.
Yeah, the strength of your moral compass is so inspiring. You're the kind of person who makes me want to be a better person.
I think we all are in our journey, so we all falter, we all come up.
So you get to the bottom of Everest. What is the first vegan meal that you go for coming off the mountain?
You know what? I was actually going to answer this because you asked me in the beginning what was my favorite meal. So now this time around, when I got to Kathmandu, and the very first meal I ate was I went to a South Indian restaurant. There's one very good one in Kathmandu, and I ordered myself a paper masala dosa. I don't know if you know what a paper masala dosa is. It's like the the jumboest dosa you can get on the planet, like literally the size of five dosas together in one. And I'm like, and with like the potato masala inside, and I'm like, I'm just going to eat this. I, relaxed and I just ate the whole dosa by myself. I'm like, I'm not sharing with anyone. We all had, like gone together. I'm like, please don't look at my dosa. This is all mine. So that was the meal I ate when I came back. And I had already decided, I had already it in my mind that I'm going to go and eat, because I'd already eaten a couple of burgers on the expedition. We had a chef who was very good. He picked up on vegan stuff very fast. And he cooked me some great burgers, and he even made me a pizza at the base camp. It was a cheeseless pizza, but believe me, you would not miss the cheese. Genuinely, you would not miss the cheese. It was that good of a pizza that he made for me at the base camp. And so, since I'd eaten some of this American junk food fare, or I should not say American because pizza is not American, but I had eaten some of this, fast food. So I really wanted to eat like an Indian dosa, which I didn't get at the base camp. So like that is what I was craving, and I went and I ate it.
Yum.
That's brilliant. Whenever Wendy and I record these podcasts, I always leave hungry, which is what's going to happen now. But yeah, that wraps up about all the time we've got with you, Kuntal. So I just wanted to give you the opportunity to talk about where people can follow you and find out more about you and all those kind of things.
Right. So people can follow me on Instagram. That is where I'm the most active. My handle is at Kuntal J. I am also on Facebook, as well as LinkedIn. And I have a website, www.kuntaljoisher.com. But that website says I'm 37 years old, which was built when I came back from Everest. And I have still haven't looked at it. I've never updated it. I will someday get to updating it, but the best way to get hold of me is via Instagram, and you can follow me there. And I keep writing about my expeditions, about my vegan food, and as I mentioned, that I'm also working as a nutrition and a fitness coach. And one of the big kind of goals for 2024 I had, and it will be a goal for 2025 as well, is to simplify nutrition and fitness information, and especially debunk some of the things around vegan food, especially because there's so much nonsense out there. And especially with carnivore diet kind of gaining a little traction, it's just, like a lot of, terrible information online. Like, honestly, carnivore diet is one of the most, in my opinion, the most dangerous ways of eating that exist today. It's going to kill you. And people, though, are just spreading tons of misinformation around it. So it is like my next year's goal, or, goal for the next 1 month. I'm hiking to Everest base camp a couple of times. But once I come back from there, I really want to, in a very dedicated fashion, talk about nutrition and fitness. So if people follow me on Instagram, that's where I'll also be sharing that content.
Great. I know lots of our followers are interested in that subject. Lovely. Thanks for taking the time, Kuntal. It's been lovely to speak to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Really appreciate the invite and the conversation.
Lovely. Thanks again, Kuntal, for taking part in the Veganuary podcast. I thought that was such an engaging interview. Wendy, are you ready for your quiz?
Bring it on.
I've got 5 true or false questions. I'd like you to answer them as quickly as possible. True or false? The largest living organism on Earth is a fungus.
Oh, I know that one's true.
Correct, it's true. The term vegan was coined in 1934.
False.
False, it was 1944. Very good vegan knowledge. Gen Z eats 57% more tofu than Gen X.
False.
It's true, apparently, though. How they found that out, I don't know. Bananas float in water.
False.
It's true.
Really?
In Spain and Mexico, avocados are called buttered pears.
True.
100% true. I couldn't have made that up, could I?
Can you say it in Spanish?
No.
So we would love to hear from our listeners. If you have stories to share with us about your most and least vegan things, if you have ideas about countries you'd love to see Veganuary in next, feel free to shoot us a note. Stuart, how do people get in touch with us?
Oh, they can email us at podcast@veganuary.com.
Beautiful. And what if they would like to take part in Veganuary?
Yeah, if you want to take part in Veganuary and get 31 days worth of coaching emails, you can just go to our website at veganuary.com and click the Take Part button. And there, all we ask of you is your name, your email address, and for you to tell us which country you live in. And then, I actually will email you every day for a month.
This podcast was recorded at Distorted Podcast Studios and produced by Jim Moore at Bloody Vegans Productions. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe. And while you're there, please rate us 5 stars. Thanks for listening.
1, 2.